Thanks for attending this session on Datathon workshop related to the oil and gas Datathon happening this fall. I'm Geoff Zakaib. I've run a number of Datathons with Data for Good. We're a group of data analysts and data scientists that volunteer to help nonprofit organizations. So our Datathons have been with those types of groups. What we really want to cover in this session are the following topics. What is a Datathon? That's a really good question, and we need to know that before we even get started. So I'll go over what a Datathon kind of looks like, and dive into what are the keys for success of a Datathon. What has to happen pre-event, during the Datathon itself, and then after the event, the post-Datathon. And then finally, I'll wrap up with a few suggestions in terms of what we need to do going into these few months before the oil and gas Datathon. So I mentioned Data for Good, and we've run a number of Datathons, 4 of them in fact, over the last few years, with organizations like the Commuter Challenge, the Distress Center, the Women's Emergency Shelter, and the Calgary Foundation. So I'll jump right into one of our examples of the Datathon with our latest one last November with the Calgary Foundation. So the Datathon is actually has 3 parts to it: Friday night, all day Saturday, and Sunday morning. So Friday night really is the launch. It's a chance for all those participants to gather together to network. But importantly, it's the introduction of the context. In our case, the group we were working with, the Calgary Foundation, came in and talked about all the amazing work that they're doing in the community. Talk about some of the objectives. What did they want to get out of the Datathon? And those objectives, those questions are really key. And I'll be going into more detail about that. Based on those groups of objectives, the teams for the Datathon start to form on that Friday night. A chance to meet your fellow Datathoners and to understand some of the complexities and some of the issues related to the subject matter. So in our case, we'll be talking about the pods and the various areas of the pods, whether that's the environment or aging infrastructure, business models, etc. So that will all be discussed on Friday night. Saturday morning, we'll come back bright and early and really drive into a bit more detail. Again, review those objective areas. And really have those teams solidify, the teams start to form on the Saturday morning, give an introduction to the data itself, where it resides, how it can be accessed, and then the Datathon begins. And we work away through lunch and dinner. All those are provided up until midnight. The various teams are working away. Sunday morning, we come back, have breakfast, and the teams put the final touches on their presentations. And this is a really exciting time. And so the rest of the morning into the afternoon is spent on hearing back from the teams and all the great work that they've done. So that's the basic outline of the Datathon. The way we run it is everybody brings their own laptops and software to use for the analytics and visualization. You bring extra cords and power bars. We don't assign you to a team, so it's really based on the objectives and your interest in those objectives that you sign up yourself and join yourself to whatever team you want. You don't have to stay with that team for the entire Datathon as well. This is just a quick view of the objective areas. In our case, for the Calgary Foundation, we had 3 objective areas that were approached through analytics and visualization, and a couple specialized teams. Team 4 there with text analytics, and number 5 with geospatial. We had a wide variety of data sources, and I'll touch on this later. and we gave a lot of information about that data as well. Also information on how to access the data and where it kind of came from. So very quickly, that's kind of what happens at a Datathon itself. So before the event, it's really critical to be engaging subject matter experts, right? So we're groups of analysts and data scientists. We have a lot of technical expertise, but our understanding of the area of the pods, we really want to engage those who really understand the context, and they can help us do the best job possible. We want to develop those list of objectives, gather data, and those data sources are absolutely critical. Come back and look at the objectives related to the data that's actually available. Group those objectives because that's the teams will form around that, but also create some collateral around what's the context and the content of the data, things like data dictionaries, as well as how to access those data sources. So these are critical because what you want to do is when you come together on that Saturday morning, you really want to get started. And you get started by answering specific questions and having these challenges put out there around what you want to work on, right? So prior to the event, you really have to have these locked down to give everybody something concrete to work on. So I mentioned in our case, we had Team 1 doing the deep dive into the foundation data. Team 2 was looking more at the Calgary perspective. Team 3 was around the Alberta perspective. And then a couple specialized teams. Team 4 on text analytics and network analytics. And Team 5 on geospatial analysis. Any type of data that could be plotted on a map. What we also did is to develop some collateral around background. So those that may not know that much about the oil and gas sector or these various pod subject areas. So if you can create some quick 1 or 2 page summaries, that would be helpful for people really getting a good context. And these can be available in advance of the Datathon to allow people to come to the Datathon and really get started much quicker. Also, we had a session in advance of the Datathon where we met and talked about some of the data sources, the data that was available. In our case, we probably had 20 different data sources. They all had something to do with the various objectives and questions. But reviewing this in advance and possibly even making this data available in advance is really quite important, so people can get started right away. So this deck we presented, it had a lot of information on the data sources. We also did some work on creating our notebooks and looking at things like data quality, which was also very helpful as well. Those are the kind of things that you really want to think about in advance of the Datathon. During the Datathon itself, the availability of those subject matter experts, they don't go away. They're involved all the way through the Datathon to set up the objectives in advance. During the Datathon, they're there with you to help answer questions about the data, about the content. Does this graph make sense? Can I combine these two elements, right? So really, you got to leverage those subject matter experts. The teams form around those objectives and bring the various skill sets to that. You want to have very clear instructions about the data itself and how to access the data and understand that. Having a great working environment, the teams will have come together for presentations, but then you want really good spaces for breakouts and to have access, really good Wi-Fi. We will have a collaboration platform available. That platform is used to access the data, but also to have a place for the teams to collaborate. And of course, critical is your curiosity and your passion and bringing that all together. What we had is kind of a complete list of the data sets that were available, the name of the data set itself, some of its contents, and then the link. In our case, we use Cybera as a data repository. But this gave folks a really quick and easy way to access the various data sets that were available. Another thing that you want to have is some very clear instructions on file sharing, how to access the data and how to collaborate. So we developed a list of what we called core data sets. so people could launch quickly into those ones that we knew were going to be used by most of the teams, most of the objective areas. How to contribute to the team. So each team had its own collaboration area where you could work together, you could share data, share analytics, share code, whatever you wanted to share, as well as to work on the presentations. So those presentations could be developed as you went through the Datathon and on that Sunday morning. So we also use Slack as a collaboration environment. That was very helpful in advance of the Datathon as well as after the Datathon itself. After the Datathon, you really want to be able to, things happen so quickly on that Sunday morning and so much information is being shared that you really want to be able to capture all that great work. So what we suggest doing is form a small team whose job is to capture the learnings and capture the analytics and visualizations and dashboards and things that each of the pods is created. So you want to gather those presentations, the analytics, the code, all together in an organized file structure so you know where all those items are. Select one of your pod members to kind of be the contact that will help to coordinate between the pods, the various pieces of analytics that have been done by the various members. And this would be the one person that would help to keep everything together. You can solicit a group of volunteers, 2 or 3 people is probably ideal, to actually prepare the documentation. In our case, we kind of prepared a final report that we shared with the Calgary Foundation, but shared with the community as well. So those folks can work together to create that report. Importantly, you want that report to be drafted, but share it back with those subject matter experts, right? Because there may be some things in there that don't quite make sense from a content point of view, and they'll help you to massage that and make sure that what gets released really is on point to addressing the objectives and the questions. And then finally, once that's done, this provides an incredible resource to share with the community, share with the oil and gas community, to be able to share with media for blogs and postings and that sort of thing as well. What we had is a quick summary of what the Datathon was all about. Talked about some of the data. Importantly, we had the Calgary Foundation sort of come back to us. So for the pods would be sort of the subject matter experts to come back and discuss, and for the pod members to discuss some of the overall learnings, and what insights were obtained, what learnings, what should be done, what could be done, what would be the next step to using all these great insights. And then what we had was report backs from each of the teams. So in our case here, each of the pods would have a report back on some of the tools and technologies that your pod used, some of the visualizations, the analytics that you came up with, and some of the cool things. So you can't include everything, but some of those higher level points that might be very interesting and that you want to capture. I should mention that after the Datathon, the collaborative environment will still be around, so some of this can be stored in that collaboration environment and accessed later. The data itself, the owners of the data will decide on how much of that data will reside in place after the Datathon. Some of it may be available, but maybe not all of it will be available. After the event, there's still a lot that we can do to take the analysis even further, to add additional insights, and to continue to work together with the subject matter experts and with your pod to even move it even further on a go-forward basis. So as you can see, there is an awful lot of presentation that's required, and gathering all the data sets, very importantly, putting together those objectives, that's absolutely critical, and that all has to be done in advance of the Datathon. So now, right now is the time to get started and work within your pod to get that going. So get volunteers from your pod to help with those tasks that need to be done in advance. You can share the load, right? Not everybody has to work on one thing. Some folks can be curating the data. Some folks can be creating collateral to help the pod members. Some folks can be looking at various ways of accessing the data or combining the data. All those tasks are really important. Be aware of the various resources that the Oil and Gas Datathon planning team is making available. The various coordination sessions and the collaboration between the pods is absolutely critical. So look for those opportunities and participate in those opportunities as we go through the next few months here in advance of the Datathon. And really, we want to share, we want to learn from each other. There's a lot of data sets that are common to the various pods, so we'll be wanting to leverage our insight. Thanks a lot for listening, and thanks for your interest in participating in the Oil and Gas Datathon. If you have any questions, please forward them to datascienceoilgas@gmail.com, and those questions can be directed to me. Thanks a lot, and enjoy your Datathon.